Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike. With me, as always, is your other co-host, John. But John, we have a very special guest today.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. This is someone both of us have followed for years, and listened to and read and everything like that. Very insightful stuff when it comes to pretty much everything Gopher athletics and Minnesota sports in general. So he's great. Covers it all.
Yeah. So if you don't know, people out there, this is Daniel House. He also goes by the moniker GophersGuru. And if you don't already subscribe to his site, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. And I actually need to get on board myself, and I'm really excited to, because I know the stuff on your site is amazing. You break down everything Gophers related. You do scheme, you do off the field, on the field, all of it.
I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, it's fun being in the independent content space. There's a few people out in it right now, and with the world changing the way it is in college sports, everybody's looking for information on players, coaches, all the movement going on, the house settlement. Just the whole world is filled with lots of news. So we'll have lots of stuff to discuss over the next 6 to 8 months.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved, and just a little bit about yourself, and as if a Gopher fan or all that kind of stuff? What got you into all of it?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but the quick synopsis is I was 16 years old. I came home from school. I had an idea. I wanted to start writing sports articles specifically about football, and I didn't even have a phone at the time. I was like to my mom, "Hey, I need your phone. I got to interview an NFL player at 4:00." And so I started interviewing NFL players when I was 16, started my first website, Vikings Corner. So I actually started in the Viking space and was able to go to their training camp, cover practices, interview players. And then I did that all the way up until I got to college. Still continue to dabble into it a little bit when I have time, but then it just merged into when I got to the U of M. I decided to start doing college football, and then I became super intrigued by it, enjoyed it a lot, got to know a lot of people there, and decided to start this adventure with GophersGuru, a subscription-based website during the pandemic. So then I kind of had to adjust and do some things differently. But now we're entering year 5 in July, so it'll be exciting to just enter another season of Gopher football. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that's amazing. Wow. And House, it's a unique, you have a unique spot in the, Gopher fandom. I don't even think Nebraska has one of you, and Nebraska has one of everything when it comes to media, but I don't think they have anybody doing what you do. So it's really cool to have you, covering the Gophers. And just quickly before we move on, tell people, the best way how they can support you and get on board with your website.
Best spot to go is GophersGuru.com. Subscribe, $5 a month to the package. So that gets you everything, every article that's written, all the premium stuff, the scheme pieces, the analysis. I try to take sort of a next-gen approach with blending the schematics with a lot of insightful insight just in terms of advanced analytics and helping you try to look at the game a little bit differently. So I've actually spent this offseason doing a hard dive on roster strategy, developing, plans on looking at how teams build their rosters. And it's been kind of fascinating now with NIL, the transfer portal, looking at how teams do it. So there's a lot of insight like that on the website.
Yeah, you really beautiful mind this stuff, man. It's incredible. The way you break things down and in the detail you put into it is fantastic.
Although with much better social skills.
Well, yes.
And PJ Fleck, if you're watching, hire Daniel House right now. Yeah. Just do it. He can help you out. All right. Let's talk about the house settlement. So, we don't have to go too crazy in depth here, but I think, the high points are, the days of players being paid from actual revenue are finally here, and it's generations overdue. Schools now have roughly, I think it's 20.5 million, something like that, 20 million annually to disperse to all their athletes. The lion's share is going to go to football, but, other sports will get their cuts as well. I think the thing that jumps out at me is I think there's going to immediately be lawsuits over the legality of this settlement, because I just don't believe they're going to get away with having a salary cap on players without the players have having any kind of collective bargaining rights. I just don't know how they're going to get around that. And also, so yeah, House, any thoughts you have on the House settlement? Take it however you want to take it.
Long time coming. It was a long wait for Claudia Wilken to make the final ruling, and everybody was sort of, okay, are we going to be able to implement the plan that we want to implement by July 1st? So the ADs were happy to just get a touch of clarity, but now, like you say, it's probably going to Capitol Hill to try to codify some of this stuff. They're looking at a bill out there right now, it sounds like. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be sorted out. But, you talk to people around the business and they all say, this is going to be a learning time frame, that this is going to take 2 to 3 years to just figure out what worked, what didn't. Everybody's going to take a little bit of a different approach in how they attack this. What type of strategy do they deploy? Are they leaning more into the transfer portal? Are they leaning into 4-year recruiting? How are they dividing their money? What resources are going where in their athletic department? Fundraising becomes just a core element of everything that athletic departments are doing. You got to have the dollar bills to be able to acquire talent and also have the staff to develop those players. So, you look at how all this is shaken out. There's just a lot of uncertainty still. But I do feel we are working towards some framework of clarity, which, as wild as it sounds, will provide some relief and give some people some stability and understanding what it's going to look like. Because right now you're operating in a framework for the last few years where, the lines are blurred a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious as well. There's been a lot of speculation on how who's going to benefit from this the most and who's going to be hurt by this. And, I'm seeing a lot of speculation, particularly within like teams like Minnesota or, Illinois or Rutgers or whatever, seem to be getting the short end of the stick. Or that's the perception anyways. Now, I don't see it that way. I think it's going to benefit everybody across the board inevitably. Not to say, obviously some will have more success than others, but it's going to be the same people that have always had more success than others, the helmet schools and what have you. But it doesn't seem to me, I see a lot of people speculating about how there's just going to be this big drop off or could be some serious damage for programs like Minnesota. What are your thoughts on that?
I believe that a lot of teams now will have to think about, what type of way do you want to build your team? Is it more in the 4-year space? Are you looking at trying to add productive players that are maybe valuable, that slip through the cracks, that you're able to build out the middle portion of your roster with highly productive players and prop up with returning players plus your transfer portal ads from bigger programs? So I think a lot of it's going to be strategy related. I feel like teams that are able to look at this thing through a unique lens to a certain degree while also blending with what has gotten them to this point, being sustainable, having success. You got to be able to blend between those two approaches. I feel like a lot of teams, you look at how they're handling this, they're taking the NFL front office approach to try to get a lot of different viewpoints on their staff and try to build it like an NFL team. And I do agree to a certain extent that might be a way of thinking about it. But at the end of the day, it's still college football. Mm-hmm. There's still components of how you build teams. The style of play is different. You study the positions that are valuable to success in college football versus the NFL. There's some parallels, but there are also some major differences. So which way do you go? Do you blend a little bit of both, where it's like you get some NFL perspective with some college perspective and you mesh those two together? Or are you going to go all in on the NFL approach? Like North Carolina, they're certainly doing that. You look at Oklahoma now, today they added like 6 front office staff members to pair up with Jim Nagy. So I'm fascinated to see what approach people take. I do feel that there'll be some parity where, like, if you have a really good roster building cycle where you're, maybe a middle tier team and you nail it and you find the productive players, you can put yourself in a path where, hey, with college football playoff expansion, where things are going, what they're talking about doing there, hey, anything's possible. So I think it's an exciting time. I'm actually looking forward to this to see how it all plays out.
Well, I feel like PJ is already kind of moving in that direction with his ability to evaluate talent and develop players and find good people within the transfer portal. I mean, I know it's not always a home run, but it feels like it's been trending in that direction is my perception. Now I understand that this all kind of stuff, this new things that were nothing set in stone, I guess, for the next 2-3 years, like you said. But to me, and I am, definitely a Gopher fan and have my own biases, but I feel like we're in a pretty good position as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just going to be all about, adapting to how the market changes. I mean, that's the hardest part, is like trying to figure out, what constitutes the values for each player. Like, what do you value? What do they value? How does it fit with the way you want to build your team? So, everybody is going to have to think about this through a different prism than probably in the past. And so I think, how you did it before, there'll certainly be some things you take from that, but then there's things that you also add into it to make yourself better and elevate up. I mean, you look at like Nico with basketball. I was looking at how he's approaching building the team, and you definitely can see there's a certain flavor and style, like versatility, positional versatility, shooting, trying to improve their effective field goal percentage, their 2-point shooting percentage. You look at the past 20 years, I mean, that's a lapse that they've had, those two areas. And so I see now, kind of a little bit of a data-driven approach to potentially how he's building the team, while also blending with, the basketball instinct. So I think it's kind of cool to look at how he's doing. I think it's kind of setting a framework for what, people are going to be looking for moving forward and how they build their teams.
Cool.
Very cool. And that honestly makes me want to go on a Gopher basketball rant, but we're going to stay. I'm going to stay focused. I'm not going to let myself get distracted. Okay. But come Gopher. Yeah, but we can talk more Gopher hoops, definitely.
Okay.
And that is cool.
Okay.
And I agree, Nico's doing something that the Gophers, they haven't done that. The Gophers have kind of, under Tubby and Richard Pitino, they were just much more the athletic team that wasn't as skilled. And they were kind of underskilled and under athletic. And so like now we're going to try being shooters, and that's cool. And that's very analogous to college football in that every team has to find the style, and they, that's what's so fun about it, right? Is that there's such a diversity of scheme in college in a way that
that's the beautiful thing. Like, I'm sitting here looking at rosters and studying them during the day, and I'm like, you have to recruit and decide your approach based on the style. So you can kind of see what coaches value, what their schemes are based on the type of talent they have on their roster, what productivity they have coming back, and the future vision of how they're recruiting, who they're offering. I mean, that's the thing. Like, people want to talk about roster building at the NFL level. Like, you got 53 and then the practice squad, where here you got a massive roster.
Yeah.
You have like the bottom half of your roster, at least when you are adding players in the NFL that are rookies, you have a ton of data to look at. You got data, you got film, you got tons of different things that you can use, where like for your recruiting, when you're taking players, like, they're high school kids, they're still learning about life, they're trying to adjust to college. Like, there are a ton of variables that you don't know, like, how's this player going to develop? So that's what makes this challenging when you're trying to put together like an NFL model. For your recruiting, it's totally different than like the given of the draft and free agency and all those things. Like, it's different, but it's the same in a sense. There's overlap.
For sure. All right, John, any other thoughts, or should we move along?
Yeah, let's move along. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to just bring this up. It just happened, so I don't have a bunch of takes on it. Like, it's going to, there's going to be more news coming out in the coming days, but bombshell, Penn State and UCLA are both going to partner with private equity. And I'm just going to go on a little rant to start, in that I hear private equity and I just think, like, I read the news, and don't these people read the news and pay attention to what private equity generally does? Like, every business that goes to private equity ends up going out of business because private equity forces them, once the bill, they give them all this money up front, and that's great. And then once the bill comes due, they demand that they cut costs beyond what is sustainable. I mean, that happened with Joann's Fabrics. That happened with, I think, Hooters. That's happened with a bunch of companies. So how is this a good idea for college football? And how, when the bill comes, because when the bill comes due, you're just in big trouble. It seems like a disaster to me. And my fear, and I know John's fear, is that somehow Minnesota is going to get wrapped up in this at some point. So do you have any initial thoughts about the private equity thing?
I actually don't have a lot of thoughts on the private equity piece. It's still kind of a new thing, and I guess I don't have a lot of like full knowledge and conversation with people yet on the impact it could have or what it would look like. But I do know that there will be some schools that, you look at UCLA, for example, their financial situation where they're they're in a deficit. They're trying to get out of that hole that they're in. Is private equity the best way to do it? I don't know. I guess I'm not up to date on, exactly the ramifications of it. And, what are conferences going to do? Is there going to be more of a private equity investment on that side of it? I don't know. I would say maybe not, but there's still a lot of stuff that has to get, figured out. I feel like that's something that's down the road. They're trying to implement the rev share and what NIL is going to look like and how the player payment system is going to be laid out. So I think it's more for schools that, probably are looking at their financials and trying to figure out, how they're going to navigate it.
Well, I want to differentiate a couple of, there's two different terms because there's also the term private capital going around. And I just kind of want to give like a little bit of a definition here to split it up is, according to Google, and that's where I'm getting this, is private capital is a broad term encompassing investments in assets not publicly traded, while private equity is a specific type of private capital investment focused on buying equity in companies. Private equity firms typically take control stakes in businesses with the goal of improving their value before selling them, whereas private capital can also include investments like private debt, venture capital, and real estate, which may not involve direct ownership. So that's being thrown around. I know a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I've been hearing that, these people are trying to differentiate. Like, it's not private equity. Don't be afraid of that. This is private capital. And in some ways, it kind of feels like it's the same thing. It's just a different, a slightly different label. But it's all involving kind of the same things. And I guess, I didn't expect it to come, I guess, from the Big Ten, which is the wealthiest conference in, college athletics. And especially from a program like Penn State. Now, I understand that there's the argument in these people wanting to maintain all of their college sports with that Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, what have you. And that's kind of the intent with behind this. And obviously UCLA is because they're in a major deficit as it is just with their athletics department. And I'm sure a lot of other programs around the country are in that same boat. And this is by no means going to stop with just UCLA and Penn State or in the Big Ten. The everything that I've been hearing of reporting is that this is going to keep coming out with other programs and other places, and that private equity is more, private capital is more surrounding like the individual schools, where private equity is being looked at and considered within conferences, which is what we've heard for years now with like the ACC and stuff like that. So yeah.
I know I'm ready to send an email to Mark Coyle and be like, please don't. Just please, like, let's not do that. But anyway, we can move on. But I thought that was a bombshell, and particularly the Penn State, because UCLA house, like you said, is in a hole. But it just, Penn State has everything going right now. So it seems crazy for me that they got caught up, but we'll follow it, and we will report when there's more news to report about it. It'll be interesting. It's definitely going to be a game changer one way or another. We think it's going to be negative, but, we've been wrong before. Yeah. So I also thought that Tim Brewster was going to take us to the Rose Bowl. So I believe things. I believe things before that weren't going to happen. All right. So let's move on and talk. The main reason we've got you here is to talk about the Gophers. And Minnesota had kind of a really interesting season last year in that they went 8-5, but they probably left. There were 3-4 games that they easily, one play goes the other way and they could have won. So they were very close to being, either 10-2 or like 6-6. Like that could have gone either way with those close games. So I bring that up because we've got PJ Fleck entering year 9, and House, to me, he just seems confident and comfortable. It seems like the relationship he has with longtime AD Mark Coyle, like, has to be a big part of that comfort. PJ knows he's got him in his corner, and PJ just seems a lot more relaxed now. I mean, he seems excited and focused, but he just doesn't seem as anxious maybe. And I wonder if that comes across to you, and what do you think of PJ Fleck entering year 9 here?
There seems to be a level of confidence with the team in certain specific areas. Like, he was very adamant during spring ball coming out about Drake Lindsay and, what he saw from Drake during the spring portion of practice, just how, he's taken a little bit more command of the team and starting to adjust and pick things up. And I think that's something that is pivotal to the season here, is just how everything comes together with Drake, because this offense it expects a lot out of the quarterback. Last year, Max Brosmer at the line of scrimmage, all the things that he was able to do to check into certain plays and have multiple options at the line of scrimmage, the ability to execute that offense. Lindsey's going to be learning as time goes on. And I think that's what fans have to be patient with, is like, there are going to be moments where it really clicks. Mm-hmm. And there'll be moments where it's like, hey, this guy is playing for the first time in the Big Ten. But like, PJ definitely had that vibe. He came out very strongly, talking about how, Drake performed in the spring, and, the versatility that they had on defense, specifically talking about the back end, what they could do with Coy and his versatility, maybe getting him some package plays on offense. So, being around here for a while, he, has a feel for, what he wants to do at Minnesota, what works, what doesn't. And now he's going to continue to try to navigate now with the change coming. What does the new look, I guess, new vibe kind of look like at Minnesota? How do you approach it? Maybe, slightly different while leaning on what has worked here before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And since you brought up Drake, I think we'll talk about him right now. I went to the open practice, the practice that was open, and then the practice that was for Dinkytown Athletes members. And I got to be honest, House, I have not seen a Gopher quarterback with an arm like this since Adam Weber. And Drake's got a stronger arm, I think, than Weber even did. I mean, there was a play I was watching in practice where he was getting rushed up the middle, and he threw like a 10-yard hitch falling down. I mean, falling on his butt. And he just whipped it. And I was like, oh, that's getting picked off. And no, just right in that little window. And I was just like, okay, this guy's got something. And the way he unleashes those deep balls is just effortless. So I'm really excited about Drake. I think he's got a high ceiling. I agree with you. He's going to be, a redshirt frosh. So he's going to be up and down, right? And because of that, maybe they lean a little more on the running game, but we can talk about that more as we go. That would be my guess, just to make Drake a little more comfortable. I guess I'm really excited about Drake. I think, the next 3-4 years could be really fun with him, assuming that things work out as planned. But what about the depth? I guess the Emmett Moorhead thing, I'm glad we have someone with some experience. I'm not sure if I trust anybody besides Drake, though. I feel like it'd be pretty tough to take an injury there.
Yeah, I mean, and Moorhead's coming in a little bit later, trying to pick up the offense, and at least he's got some experience and, playing in offenses that are stylistically similar. I mean, I was able to go back and look at some of the offense, looking back at his time with Boston College and the types of, route tree he's thrown into, similar in some respects. I think that will definitely help. I mean, he's big. I actually just saw him recently, and it's like he's a big guy. Like, he stands out. Like, he's going to be a bigger pocket type of passer. Like, I don't think, you go back and look at his games, his mobility is not something he's going to lean on, but he's able to work from the pocket and, work off play action and boot and be able to layer in crossers, and, do the things that Minnesota's asking to do with the quick game. And I think you look at like the whole backup quarterback room. Yeah, there's some question marks there, certainly, but I know that they like being able to get Emmett in here, that they feel like his veteran experience is something that is very valuable, and that they think that that's going to be, useful, because it's not like you're bringing in a guy that hasn't been around the block. I mean, he's been in a couple of different programs, and he's actually played, in the P5 level in games. So I think that's helpful. But yeah, there's definitely, like, if something were to happen to Drake, yeah, there's a question mark there for sure.
I feel like that's modern college football, though. I feel like the days of having like an experienced backup you can count on, like you like when Ohio State could go to Kenny Guyton off the bench, and like I remember that year, and we're like, oh, Ohio State's gonna fall apart, and then it just this career backup is actually awesome. Like you don't have that.
You're not stockpiling talent, like you got your developmental guys, you might have a younger player that's sitting there that's super coveted that might wait it out for a year. But now it's like the years of having a backup. I mean, it's just going to come down to luck. Can you stay healthy at the quarterback position? Because, you're not going to be probably as, it's not going to be as much of a luxury to have that backup there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I think because of that, I like that the Gophers kind of have a scheme that isn't really quarterback run dependent, because I just think in this day and age, running a dual threat scheme when you can't stockpile talent is really dangerous with the hits guys can take. But anyway, before we go on, we're going to talk about the rest of the position groups on offense, but let's talk a little bit about offensive coordinator Greg Harbaugh. He enters year 3. He struggled in year 1, but I remember when he was asked about it, and it was before last season. And they asked, they asked him what, how he felt about the offense, whatever, blah, 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 like what had gone wrong last year. Did he learn from it? And he was basically like, yeah, I mean, we ran a lot of good stuff last year. Our quarterback just couldn't execute. Like he pretty much came out and said that about Ethan, and I was like, oh, okay, so now we're going to be awesome. And you know what? I was really impressed with him. I mean, they made immense strides last year. Even though the offensive line was not a great run blocking line, they were able to, really work and focus on the passing game and make up the difference and, make up a lot of yards there that they would normally have gotten on the ground. And then eventually as the season went on, they got better at running. But so I think, upgrading to Max Brosmer from 8th and Callie McManus is obviously a big upgrade. But I also think, man, Harbaugh runs some great stuff. Mm-hmm. I just think I keep thinking back about I've been rewatching some games lately because I'm jonesing for football. And our package of sneaks and fake sneaks that helped us beat USC, Illinois, and Wisconsin. I mean, that alone is brilliant, all off of one simple play like that. And then just the way he layers passes, layers routes, and puts the defense in conflict. I don't know, House, you want to wax poetic about Greg Harbaugh? Because I've been really impressed with him.
I thought Greg did an awesome job last year just adapting to the personnel that he had available on offense. You look at what Mac's strengths are. It comes down to quick release, ability to see the field, get the ball out fast. So they were able to incorporate the quick game, a lot of sticks and underneath stuff to be able to put themselves in positions where they weren't in 2nd and 3rd and long, in manageable down and distances, staying on schedule offensively. That allows you to open your playbook wide. Your play action is going to work better because, you're not backed up and the pass rush can tee off. So I thought that was something that they certainly emphasized, was using the quick game more as an extension of the rushing attack, because like you say, they weren't as efficient running the football. There were games where they had to lean on the quick game to be able to get 5 yards on first down, so they're 2nd and 5, and then they're able to really open up the playbook. And I thought using pre-snap motion, being able to set matchups and leverage up for receivers. You look at Daniel Jackson last year, I thought the offense suited his strengths extremely well. They were able to get him a lot of positive matchups to set up routes, be able to allow him to attack leverage. There were a lot of situations where, design was able to put Daniel Jackson in a spot where he could win a one-on-one matchup or, work into space into his zone and settle in. And then, you look at Greg's ability to layer passing concepts over the course of games where it's you see them introduce a design and make a subtle tweak. The USC game, for example, is one they're able to kind of show that that throwback screen, and was able to set that up and make a little subtle tweak later in the game, come back to it and, have success. What they were able to do, layering concepts, teams were studying them out and going, hey, here's some things they like to do, but then come in and make that one subtle tweak when the defense is anticipating, and you can create a big play. So I would say now the big thing is Greg took a huge step forward. The investment and energy last offseason was all about modernizing the passing game, adding a lot of stuff that you see if you're watching the NFL and studying the NFL. Now it's like, okay, what do you do to take the next step? It's elevate, modernize the running game, and match that up with what they're doing in the passing attack. So that's where I would say fans should watch for potentially a small evolution in how they do things. And maybe that's related to their personnel as well, because they're going to be, I would say, a more mobile, athletic offensive line than they've been in the past. So keep an eye on that.
Absolutely. That's all really good stuff. And as long as we're talking about, you brought up the running game, let's talk about Darius Taylor back for year 3. One of the best running backs in the Big Ten. He can run the ball. He can catch it and run. He'll make guys miss in space. He's got power. He's kind of got everything. The only thing he doesn't have is deep speed. And now we bring in a MAC transfer in AJ Turner, who has that juice, who allegedly has that deep speed, who averaged, over 8 yards a carry or whatever it was last year. So I'm really excited about the running back situation with Darius Taylor at the front of the room and now AJ Turner coming in. But what do you, and I even think some of the depth with Fame could be really good. What do you think about the running back room this year?
Yeah, you got Darius who, has the physical rushing style. He's able to, also be versatile. I thought that was the thing that made Darius take a step forward in his game last year, is what he was able to do as a receiver. And, obviously he had that background in high school to be able to catch balls and, hey, a check down's not a bad thing. Like, people freak out about check downs that has that label that, like, oh man, just checking down. Well, that's how you stay on schedule offensively. And that was a big thing. Like, when they weren't running the balls well, he's able to be involved, through the route design game and in screens and all that stuff. So I thought that was something that he added to his game that was huge. And so, obviously Darius is leading the way. He's the front man, but you bring in, like you say, AJ Turner, who I think gives them a little bit more of a speed skill set, some acceleration. He does a good job of letting things set up, pressing holes, finding the cutback creases in the zone game. In particular, I think off outside zone is where he'll shine the most. A little acceleration in the second level and able to kind of make that sharp cut, redirect runs, and navigate through congestion. So I think that, you look at Turner and Taylor, the complementary elements of their skill set and how they fit together. And then, they bring in Cam Davis from Washington, who's more like a goal line physical guy that can come in short yardage situations and help you there. I do feel like I've always been a guy that believes in having different rushing styles. Yep. Because I feel like you kind of settle into how someone's running the football over the course of the game. Like, it's like getting into a batter's box, you're like, okay, I'm going to tee off on this fastball. Guys, has this typical rushing style that's like a fastball. Well, you got to have a changeup, you got to have a slider, you got to have some stuff that you can do to be able to mess with the defense and don't let them settle in. So I think having 3 different skill sets like that, plus I think you mentioned Fame. Fame flashed a little bit to me. He's got a little blend of speed and power in him. He practiced once when we were there, and then he didn't practice the last couple. I think we only had 3 open practices, and he practiced 1. But I liked his film coming out of Philly out there. I think he's got some potential entering year 2 to get some rotational time as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of having, like you said, I'm really glad you mentioned that, of having those 3 different styles. Being able to switch it up when you need to, and not just, I guess it benefits obviously situationally, like dealing with what's going on with the game. But I also like that it changes the pace, which is good. And I think that having 3 guys that are reliable in those instances is just incredibly beneficial. So I'm really excited for the running back room this year, more than I mean, we've had great running backs come through here, but this is kind of like my favorite type of ideal situation with what we have.
Yeah. And we haven't seen deep speed at running back in a long time.
Yeah. So
that's exciting to add that to the roster for sure. All right, now let's talk about the wide receivers and then tight ends. We got Le'Meke Brockington back, got Christian Driver back, got Javon Tracy to transfer in. Logan Loya also, that he came from UCLA, Malachi Coleman from Nebraska, etc. You lose Jackson and Spencer at wide receiver, and they took, they were the offense last year essentially for a lot of it. So you're replacing a lot, but it looks like there's a lot of guys who could really contribute. And I just think Javon Tracy looks like the next wide receiver one, at least to me in practice when I saw him. But obviously, take that with a grain of salt. I didn't see too much. House, what do you think? Do you think the ball gets spread around a little more this year to different receivers? And who do you think? Do you think Tracy gets the lion's share, or who do you think else could be in contention for that?
This is more a season where the ball gets spread around. I don't think you're going to see the offense being concentrated through one specific pass catcher. This is going to be more of a balanced distribution where, it's not just the wideouts, it's the tight ends, it's the backs getting some balls. They're going to make it so the defense has got to defend all those different options. So I'd say it definitely will be spread out, but you look at Javon Tracy. I think he's a guy that can give them some vertical stretch ability, some yards after the catch skills. You look at last year, he was first among MAC receivers in yards after the catch per reception, good at breaking tackles. I think he forced 17 last year, which is like top 3 in the MAC. So being able to make plays after the catch, win the yards after catch battle, I think that's important. Only dropped 2 balls last year. So, you look at what he was able to do. Being reliable, someone that can potentially give them, a vertical stretch element, make some plays on the ball downfield. I look at, Logan Loya coming in. I'm actually pretty high on Logan Loya. I think he's a crafty slot guy. I've been wanting them to get one of those guys for a while that just is able to win underneath a lot. And you look at what they were able to do with their quick game last year, those sticks and quick game routes, that tree that he was able to run at UCLA with Chip Kelly previous year, and then had new scheme last year. But being able to run all those quick game route tree concepts, I think it's going to fit well with what Minnesota's doing, give them a type of skill set that they haven't had. And then you got Lemecki as a veteran who's skilled as a run blocker, the things that they can do where they can bunch stuff up, let him block. And he's made progress as a receiver, just in his short area route running, some of the things that they want him to get better with. But, I think this wild card guy for me is Jalen Smith from Mankato. I'm interested in him this year. I was pretty high on him coming out of Mankato. I thought he was someone that kind of slipped through the cracks, maybe a late developer. But he's got some great suddenness to him, good hands, good tracking, someone that they can motion around to get some matchups for. I keep an eye on Jalen Smith. I think he's pretty talented, but it's just a matter of if he emerges this year in a little bit of a role, or is it next year? I'm pretty high on Jalen Smith.
What are your thoughts on Jameson Gears? I know last year he definitely had some amazing highlights and a couple blunders that were frustrating. But
Rutgers game he lost us. Lost us the game. but he played really well overall.
He looks like he could be a star, in my opinion. I mean, there's definitely some impressive talent there.
I look at the tight end room as a whole. I believe there'll be an emphasis on, 12 personnel, maybe getting 3 tight end, 13 personnel out there, using Frank Bierman along with Gears and Drew Bibber from Purdue. That allows them to do some things, put the defense in a bind and dictate how they're going to play, from a personnel standpoint. Like you say, Gears, big emphasis for him this year is just versatility, being an all-around player, continuing to develop his skills as a route runner. I thought he was a good underneath guy to be able to, move the chains, convert a lot of first downs. I think there's even more expansion in his game to just, become a consistent threat, working over the middle of the field, being able to stretch teams in that capacity. But Drew Bibber is someone to watch. I know that people have kind of said that he's someone that has adjusted and acclimated well, red zone type of threat, basketball background, one of those power forward type of skill sets to complement Jameson Gears. And then, like you say, Frank Bierman potentially playing, a versatile role when they're able to get multi-tight end sets. So I think the tight end position is going to play a big role in what Minnesota does this year, just based on, having the personnel available that they do.
Wow. I will say I'm torn because I feel bad for Purdue fans because they don't have NIL to keep any of their football players, but I feel good that we were able to steal a good football player from them. Yeah. It was a fire sale in West Lafayette, and everybody in the Big Ten took one. Ohio State took one. Indiana took one. We took one. Yeah, it was that for sure. So I'm excited to see him play as well because I know Purdue was not happy to lose him.
They're able to get Kevin Kane from Purdue too, the Nichols coach.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Kane got poaching the coaching staff too.
Yeah, that's a good call. I actually had totally forgotten that. It's very good, very cool.
Kevin Kane.
All right. Now let's go to a unit that looks totally different this year from last year and talk about the O-line. So you've got a few transfers, and then you've got guys like Nathan Roy, Greg Johnson, Ashton Beers, Marcellus Marshall, and Dylan Ray. And then there's the there's the other transfer from Washington. I forget his name. But House, what do you think? Do you have a strong feeling on what the starting five is going to be, or where do you where do you think? Do you have your ear to the ground? Like, are there any rumblings, or what do you think? I know they switched around a lot in the spring, position-wise.
Yeah, they switched around a lot in the spring, probably by design when it was open, to not really give much of a insight into what they're thinking. But I also think that, like, there is a lot of uncertainty. Like, they don't know exactly what the combination is going to look like. They'll gather a lot of information. They were doing it in the spring. They'll do it in the fall here and determine what the path forward is, because Khalid Tafai, transfer from Washington, didn't practice in the spring, so they got to see where he's at, what type of contribution he could make. You look at Greg Johnson, was playing center the previous year. He's going to move to left guard now, which I think is a better, more natural fit for his game, potentially. His length, his movement skills, and how he projects into that position. I actually just wrote about that on the site. I think that's a good spot for him. Ashton Beers playing center, who was playing right guard last year. That was someone that PJ really mentioned as an improved player, that he thought that was a good transition. He was settling in nicely, starting to pick that up. And then I think the right side is kind of where the uncertainty is. You had Martez Lewis as kind of a depth piece there as an insurance policy. He transfers to Northwestern. You're able to bring in Marcellus Marshall, who I think should probably play right guard based on watching his games at UCF. I think that's probably the best fit. But I think it comes down to Dylan Ray. Is Dylan Ray, for transfer from Kentucky, is he able to play right tackle? Or is he better suited at right guard and they slide Marcellus Marshall out to right tackle? I guess I don't know exactly, what that combination is going to look like. And then, on the left side, Khalid Tafai or Nathan Roy, which guy emerges? I mean, there's going to be some battles in camp to kind of figure out who is the best, what's the best combination, and how do they go about, crafting it up. Tony Nelson could factor into the picture if they want to plug somebody into the interior. I think they have a lot of interior options. It's just going to be about figuring out the path at the tackle spots, what it looks like, because they're experiencing some big turnover there. And, it is, when you look at it, they do have experience coming back. They got two guys returning, and, Beers and Johnson that had good experience, but, they're going to be playing new positions. Plus you got new transfer ads. So I think the offensive line is going to be one of the key components of the season. That group has to gel well together, and maybe, sometimes it takes a little time for that to gel and start to catch stride. So I guess I'm curious how that comes together.
Yeah, it does almost seem like shades of 2019 when it like took a while, and then when it clicked, it really clicked. Yeah, that's very cool. All right, offense as a whole. So I got to believe, with Drake Lindsay being a first-year starter, that PJ is probably, as much as we were past happy last year, I got to imagine PJ is probably going to want to run the ball a little more this year than he did, and put a little more on the run game to take the pressure off his freshman quarterback. What do you think, House? How do you think it's going to break out that way?
I'd say running the ball will become important, but it'll be based on the game, where it's like, if you need to run, you need to throw a little more based on the type of defense you're playing, you can, but, you're going to run the ball to try to, slow the game down, control the clock, be efficient play to play, allow Drake Lindsay to have good opportunities off of play action. So I'd say the identity might look slightly different, but it will be adaptable based on, the type of trends and tendencies that they're going to see on a week-to-week basis. And with the younger quarterback, there's no doubt that you're going to want to put him in positions where he's staying ahead and on schedule. And so I do believe that there'll still be that component of being able to early down passing, putting yourself in, where you're able to put the ball out in space, get, 5 yards and set yourself up so that you're on schedule, because on schedule performance and being a good down to distances is critical for a young quarterback. So I do believe that run game efficiency has to improve this year if they want to take a huge step forward, they got to be able to run the ball much better.
Well, what I really appreciated last year, Mike and I talked about this a lot, was PJ's, and I know he had a lot of trust in Max, and rightfully so. But it was such a relief to see PJ like trust in his quarterback and trust in his offensive coordinator and remain aggressive in times where he usually would, turtle and then be, too conservative, and then we would end up somehow losing a game or just fall off completely. And so it was a nice change of pace for a fan, I think, to see that. And I know that, like it's a whole nother story when you have a freshman quarterback. And I'm sure like he might have to pull back a little bit, but do you think he has that kind of trust in his offensive coordinator and in his offense in general? Because there is still a decent amount of experience coming back as far as some of his star players, and obviously having Drake, to study under Max Brosmer last year.
And I think that's stuff that you learn in fall camp. You learn, that's where the separation begins, and where you learn, okay, here's what the team can do. Here's what they can't do. Here's who I can trust. Here's who I can't trust. Here's how the team is progressing and everything's coming together. I mean, just based on what he said about Drake and how they feel about Drake, they definitely are showing very strong signs of optimism about, where he's at, how he's growing, the future direction there. I think it's just going to be about, learning what these guys can do in the fall and then adapting the approach based on that, because this is where the team is built. When they come back here from this break and everybody lines up and they put the ball down, that's where you find out, here's the players you have. You have a little idea in your mind of where things are at, but you wouldn't believe in a 4 week period there what can change and what they learn and how their approach might change.
Cool.
For sure. All right, let's talk some defense, huh? So
Defense.
Danny Collins has been with PJ Fleck going all the way back to Western Michigan. He's, it's been talked about a lot how he had to work. He'd be working in the middle of the night just so he could afford to, chase his dream. And he's been with PJ forever, and PJ trusts him and all that kind of stuff. He brings what he's calling his havoc defense to the Gophers. And Collins has really big shoes to fill. Corey Heatherman was fantastic last year. As good as Joe Rossi was, Corey Heatherman, I thought, was better. Mm-hmm. And it was better because instead of sitting back and playing bend but don't break all the time, we were attacking and forcing turnovers and forcing the issue in a way that we hadn't in the past. So that was really exciting for me. I'm curious about your thoughts on Danny Collins. Do you think this defense is more of a Joe Rossi bend but don't break thing with Collins, or is it more like Corey Heatherman where it's like let's get guys, let's attack and force the issue, and we're going to give up a big play or two, but most of the time we're going to make things harder for the offense?
You'll probably see a blend between, Joe Rossi style and Corey Heatherman, because he's worked for both. He's worked for other people in his career and taken bits and pieces of, what each of those guys do and applied them into his own style, based on their personnel. I could see them being maybe a touch more aggressive with, the front seven pieces, the versatility, some of the guys that they could feature, in the pressure look side of it, that they might, when they get into situations where they're in passing downs, do some things a little bit differently and send some pressures. But I also think they'll lean on some of the stuff that's worked before, like simulating creeper pressures, giving the illusion that they're going to blitz, but, dropping a defensive lineman in exchange for a second and third level defender and rushing four. Being able to eliminate explosive plays, that's the key to success. I mean, you don't want to be in spots where you're giving up chunk plays, because your odds of winning when you're allowing all of those plays go down significantly. So I think it's that art and balance of knowing when to send pressure and when to not. And I think that's where Corey Heatherman did a good job last year, was, switching pictures, changing pictures. I thought that the stylistic difference in that defense was, it was about pinning the pocket, forcing the quarterback to have to, work from impeded vision lanes in front of them, and then, change the coverage picture where it's like, they're rolling coverages different ways, inverting coverage responsibilities for certain guys. And that allowed them to get their hands on the ball, make some plays, create some turnovers by, the pass rush and the coverage working together in lockstep. So that's what I think was the big difference last year, was just those subtle tweaks. And you watch Corey Heatherman, he's off that Brian Haynes, Kirk Signetti tree. They run that same type of defense where they're constantly rolling coverages and, changing the picture on the quarterback, forcing him to hold that ball for that extra half to full second. And at the end of the day, that can make a huge difference. So I think Danny will lean on the principles of Joe and just like fundamental coaching, eliminate the explosive play, and then also blend in some of the aggressive, picking your spot type of pressure stuff that Corey Heatherman added.
That's really exciting. I'm kind of pumped. And, Danny Collins also he is clearly a big upgrade as a recruiter. Mm-hmm. So I certainly hope he can get it done on the field, because what he's done recruiting his own room and now recruiting the whole defense, I think has been pretty impressive so far.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk D-line. So big time experienced returners in Devin Eastern, Jalen Logan Redding, and Anthony Smith. So that leaves, we'll talk about Anthony Smith, but that leaves, let's talk about the rush end spot. Do you think Jackson Howard is the guy? Like, do you think he starts there, or how do the snaps break down? And how do you feel about the depth behind him or behind them? And also, do you think the new Super Frosh, we had Corey Parrish, now this year's version is Emmanuel Carmo. Is he a guy who potentially carves out a pass rushing role on third and long or whatever?
Rush end's a spot that I'm monitoring, trying to figure out, where are those guys at in development. We're not there as much. We're trying to, glean what we can from, what we see in practice. But I'd say, like, Jackson, you got Lucas Finnessy, you got Carter Menz. Like, is it a rotational type of deal there where they're mixing those guys in? Does somebody take a big step forward and solidify themselves at that spot? That is something that people don't truly appreciate, I don't think, like how reliable and solid Danny Strigow was. And they'll find out, because I think he's probably got a nice chance to, potentially push for a roster spot in Jacksonville as an undrafted rookie. You just amazing. Look at like the progression that he, made over time, the ability to just execute the small details that maybe people don't notice on the surface. That, like, that position is super important. They had like Thomas Rush, and then they had, right into Danny. They had Boye before that. Yep. Like, they've had very good pipeline here. Now it's like, is Jackson Howard able to take that step? Is it Lucas Finnessy? Is it Carter Menz? Like, I'm curious to see who it is. And then you mentioned Carmo. Is Carmo more of like an off-ball, on-ball hybrid type of guy? Are they working him off-ball and then bringing him down on-ball for some certain packages and mugging him around? I think he's got great movement skills that they can capitalize upon, and some versatility. It would be probably more in a situational type of role, but rush end is certainly a spot that I'm watching. Like, I want to see the progression of that group, through the fall into the first couple games.
Mm-hmm. For sure. No, I agree with you there. At tackle, first of all, Anthony Smith, man, that guy. I mean, you can put him anywhere. He is a terror. He's going to be a junior this year. I mean, I'm just really excited for him. It seems like he could bust out in a big way. Do you think he could be kind of a Big Ten household name at a certain point if if things break right?
Yeah, and I look at this year, the type of role that he could play. He was inside a little bit last year, maybe more playing on the 5 and kicking inside occasionally. The physical and athletic traits are there. Does he take a step forward fundamentally in consistency to become a guy that's disruptive all the time on a play-to-play basis? You saw what he was able to do, production-wise. He's able to put up disruptive numbers. Like, is he able to take that another big step in his game with playing in the type of alignments that he will be, potentially getting the matchups that he will get? I want to see, what's the next step for Anthony Smith in his development, his progression. He's going to be a key player. You look at this pass rush, those veterans, they're going to be leaning heavily on them because, you look behind those guys, it's a lot of unproven younger options that are going to be rotating and dashing in. So the snap shares on those guys are going to need those players to be very productive and stay healthy over the course of the season for them to be successful. Because I think this season will come down to how they perform on the O-line, how they perform on the D-line, how those pieces come together. That will dictate success.
For sure. Do you think, Devin Eastern's been around a long time, so has Jalen Logan Redding. I know a lot of people have been hyped on Eastern, going back to when he was a recruit. Is there another level there? Can he unlock something? It feels like, I know there's probably been one guy in between, but it feels like we haven't had a really disruptive defensive tackle who was always a problem since like Sam Renner.
Renner was unreal, man. God,
he was so good, right?
That is an underappreciated Gopher, man. I'm telling you, get that guy matchups. I remember that Nebraska game he had. My gosh, he ripped it up, man. He was kind of fun to watch that year. They got him a lot of good matchups. But I look at Devin, like I thought he made a ton of progress as the season went on. I think this guy's gotten better. When you watch where he was at when he got here to where he is now, there's a tangible upward development there, which is kind of what you want to see. Now it's like, okay, he's upward. Is there another step in the progression like we talked about with Anthony? I think he's done better just adjusting to playing inside. He was a guy that was more of like that defensive end type of body type that bulked up and then went inside and had to learn all the ability to get underneath guys, play with your hands, good pop, get underneath guys. And I think that's something that he was able to do a little bit more as time went on. Like he became more disruptive. He's winning at the point of attack. And I think that now with another year of development, maybe he's able to take another step forward. Him and JLR inside are going to be counted on big time. And then after that, it's like, who can perform and take a step forward? Is it someone like Theo Randall? Can he potentially emerge? I think he won Neckton of the Week. PJ gave him Neckton of the Week. So
nice.
Maybe he's someone that can emerge as a rotational guy. I guess I'm curious at defensive tackle, who is that guy that can come in on a rotational basis and make an impact? Because you look at these teams that are successful and sustainable, they're able to have a lot of guys that can rotate, keep their pass rush fresh. Minnesota, I'm watching. I feel confident in the vets, like the three main guys, but then it's like, what happens after that?
Yeah. For sure. I would agree with you on all that stuff. Let's move on and talk linebacker. I mean, we got Maverick Baranowski back. We got Devin Williams back, which is so good. It's so great to have those guys. They've got a lot of experience at this point. They played a lot of football. Also got Jeff Roberson to transfer in as a power conference transfer. How do you think the snaps at linebacker shape up? Do you think, I feel like this is going to be a strong linebacker unit. What do you think, House?
I think it'll be situational, kind of how those guys are used. You'll see a lot of Dev and Mav, Roberson working his way in. I thought Joey Gerlach popped a little bit in the spring when we were there making some plays. Maybe he's taken a step forward in his progression. I think it was just the physicality piece, adjusting to that, because he definitely has the athletic ability and movement skills that, you're looking for a linebacker. It was just taking that next step physically. Matt Kingsbury, somebody that I think, could work on ball or off ball. Maybe they, get him some snaps working down to the rush end in certain packages. I think he saw that a little bit in the bowl game. So, linebacker, I feel as if they, have some guys there that they can use on, certain situations, mixing it up. And Mav's experience level, Dev's experience level, like they have enough experience there that, along with some of the guys that have been developing up, they should be, okay at the linebacker spot.
Yeah, I agree. What about now my guy that's close to my heart? So how's John and I both I grew up in Fargo. He grew up in Moorhead, just opposite sides of the river. And oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. I totally lost it. It's gone. John, oh my God, I just went blank I haven't done that in a long, long time on here. All right, so we'll move on then.
We can
sorry.
revisit it.
Yeah, we can revisit it if I think of what I was going to say, but that's okay. Let's talk about the secondary. That's funny. That's funny that I just did that. All right. Safeties are oh, yeah. I remember what I was going to say. We can come back to it. Yes. The guy that I want to be good, but I grew up going to Detroit Lakes. We both did.
Yes.
Mason Carrier, man.
Mason Carrier, man. I remember watching his high school film and also just watching his high school lifting weights film.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, that is an explosive athlete. I know he might be a little young to be getting a big role at linebacker, but do you think he carves out a role on special teams this year? And do you have high hopes for him in the future the way we do?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I got to see a little bit more of him in practice and get some more reps. But, the film definitely, was something that popped. I know Joe Rossi liked him a lot when he was recruiting him, that he was someone that popped and caught his eye as well. So it's one of those things where it's hard to get a pinpoint on where some of these younger players are at because, you're not at practice as much, because of, availability. But, you look at the main way you get an idea of where players are at is once they get in the game. So I think probably special teams would be the spot that he's at right now.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be exciting to see for sure. All right, then let's talk about this secondary. The safeties are absolutely fantastic. You've got, boy wonder Koi Parich. You've got Kerry Brown back, who is also fantastic. You could argue is probably even a little more consistent than Koi, even if he doesn't have quite the same, athletic upside. And then Aiden Gooseby, after a really rough 2023, came back and played really well last year, I thought. So I feel really good about safety. Obviously, corner is less certain. You've got a plethora of guys competing for time, including transfer Jalen Bowden and rising sophomore Zaquan Bryan. How do you feel about the whole secondary? Do you think this has the potential to be another great Gopher unit, or are you kind of worried about cornerback and nickelback?
Here's what I think. I think Minnesota will probably use Koi a little bit more in the nickel piece so they can get the three safeties on the field, working on his man coverage and his physicality. You got to remember the guy came in June last year.
Yeah.
So
he was hurt.
Yeah, that too. He had to rehab a touch and then get ready to play. So now you think about, they probably can unlock more versatility in his game just based on the time that he's been here. So I'd say I'm watching him potentially sliding down situationally to play nickel and passing downs to allow them to utilize his movement skills and his coverage ability. And then they could have Kerry and, Aiden out on the field as well with him. So they're going to use the versatility of the safety room. I know Garrison Monroe had a pretty good spring. They got Darius Green, who's, didn't do a lot in the spring, but, a veteran player who can come in situationally. I think you're going to see them try to get those safeties out on the field a lot in different packages and sub packages. Jayante McMillan, you could kind of classify him in as a safety as well, kind of a nickel safety type that comes down, when they're going to be in dime or, as like a sub package nickel. He's someone that could emerge for some snaps too. I think the cornerback spot, like you say, that's where it's kind of less certain. You got Zaquan, obviously, but who emerges opposite of him? Jalen Bowden trying to pick it up, coming from NC Central's an FCS guy. I think you look at how he's got good movement skills, like good athleticism and length. It's just going to be about, getting used to the speed of the game and picking up all the little nuances and details of the scheme. But, him along with Rylan Kelly, who's been in the program for a while, Sam Madu, they have some younger players there. Who is someone that could emerge? Is there a surprise guy? I thought Naeem Parrish, freshman, popped a little bit in the spring when we were there. Seems to be very instinctive for a young player. Played at Bergen Catholic, who does a really good job of developing corners. I'm not saying he's going to be a guy that, potentially emerges as a starter, but could be, rotational snap player. So yes, they do have some things to figure out at corner, who emerges opposite Zaquan, but I do think they're going to interchange the safeties a lot as nickel, between nickel and safety. And Kerry can do a lot of stuff with versatility too. I mean, he plays free, strong, nickel, all that stuff. I'm a big Kerry Brown guy. I think he's got a very bright future.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Everybody talks about Coy, but I'm high on Kerry Brown. I think he's got a very bright future.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on
Kerry?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, John. No,
I was just going to say, what are your thoughts on John Nestor, the Iowa transfer?
Yeah, I'm interested to see kind of how he fits in. It sounds like corner here. I kind of feel like he's more of a safety skill set potentially. Is he kind of a nickel player that they use in that type of capacity on passing downs? I want to see how he kind of fits into the mix. I feel like he's kind of a tweener between playing safety, corner, nickel, but he's someone that I believe, had a lot of interest and interaction with in four-year recruiting, kind of pivoted back when he hit the transfer portal and brought him in as a depth option.
Okay.
Right on. Yeah, I thought McMillan flashed in the practices I saw. I was favorably impressed with him. So it's Bowden? It's not Bowden, huh? It's Bowden.
Okay. Jalen Bowden, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought he looked good too. So it'll be, I feel like I'm supposed to be really nervous about our secondary, but our safeties are so good and we've been so consistent in the secondary from year to year under PJ that I just really, going back to Jerry Kilt, we've been consistent in the secondary pretty much, most of the time. So I guess I'm less worried about that but we'll see. I think it's good that we have, and when we get to the schedule game in a short bit, we can talk about it. But I do think, considering the new guys we have kind of a nice runway schedule wise for guys to get up to speed. But we'll get to that. And the last thing we'll talk about that before we play the schedule game, House, is kicker, punter, return specialist. So kicker and punter leave me a little worried. I'm not sure. We don't know for sure who's going to start. I mean, at punter, we have a better idea. I'm like, there's a big part of me that's really hoping it's Daniel Jackson, the new Daniel Jackson, who wins the job, just because he's such a freak athlete. I mean, for a guy to have a kicker who's got a leg like that and ran a sub 11 second 100-meter dash is just crazy to me. So, but I also realize he's going to be a true frosh. So I don't know if I can expect him to beat out Denneberg or anything. But what do you think, House? How do you think we're going to be any good at kicker and punter this year, or is it going to be a struggle like last year?
Well, it's definitely a transition. There's we're taught a lot about transition in spots, where it's like you got some frontline guys and then it's like, okay, what's that next level going to look like? Those rotational players that are kind of the difference in helping your roster take the next step. I look at punter and kicker. Daniel Jackson's very talented. I watched him do workouts a couple of different occasions, and he's definitely gifted. Like, if there's somebody that can come in and help, like, he could potentially be that type of guy. I don't know. Like, it's unknown when you're a freshman how you're going to adjust and how everything's going to go. But the door is definitely open. They're going to let those guys compete it out. They added Brody Richter in the transfer portal from UCLA. They also had Tom Weston, D2 transfer punter as well. So they're going to try to create some competition in that room. I could kind of sense that potentially might be the case based on spring ball when I was there, that they would look to generate and create some more competition in the specialist room. So again, unknown, but definitely made it a priority to add a couple of punters in the transfer portal to let them compete it out. Yeah,
and I'd say the great thing is we got Coy Parrish back returning kicks and punts potentially. Do you think it sounds like sometimes you see coaches don't want their best players doing that, but it sounds like PJ is going to let Coy do as much as possible, up to and even including snaps on offense. So I imagine that Coy will be the main returner. And that's really exciting because we saw what he did last year. I mean, he had some returns in different games that were big.
Yeah, and those are the type of things that, can flip games. You got to have those. If you have a dynamic return from time to time, that can change the whole flow and momentum of the game. And you look at like field position margin, how big it is to contributing to success. You got to be consistent in the return game. If you're going to be aggressive, you got to at least get out to where, the touchback is going to, set you up. So I think that is something that is important, and low key kind of a small variable that people don't think about is like being consistent and steady in the return game, especially when you're going to be aggressive. I think that that's pretty important because field position, you might not think it matters, like 3 to 4 yards of field position at the end of a game.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at how Iowa's built their DNA and how they do it. Field position is everything, man, everything.
Yeah.
And it correlates to winning in a massive way.
I didn't even know that Minnesota could return a punt until last year. I didn't know that was a thing. It was really cool. Like I saw all these other teams do it, and then then all of a sudden Coy started, running with the ball. I was like, oh wow, like this is so we can do that too. It was great.
So I went to an event and that Coy was at, that a few of the players were at. Greg Johnson was there. Coy was there last year. And it was like a Q&A, and like for whatever reason, it was on like kind of a gloomy day and not that many people showed up. So I kind of got to ask a lot of questions. And I asked Coy, I was like, do PJ or Ligashevsky give you a hard time when you catch those punts when the defense is bearing down on you and it's a little chancy? And he goes, I haven't dropped one yet.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like him. Confidence level is like up here.
Oh, I aspire to be confident the way Coy Parrish is confident. I mean, it's like,
oh my gosh,
it's amazing. That guy is. He's
oh
a fun
gosh.
Time. It'll be all right. Quick, just because we don't have to go in depth, but do you think that he actually gets any snaps on offense, or is that just an off-season storyline?
No, I do believe there'll be some stuff that they'll try to put in. I don't think it's going to be like you're going to see this guy as like a full-on offensive player, but like, right. Package stuff here or there.
Yeah,
for sure. Cool. That's kind of what we thought too. All right, House. Now I apologize to those listening. It's all the same to you, but those watching, I did forget to load the Minnesota schedule, but that's okay. We can play a little game and finish up that we like to call the schedule game. So first, I'm just going to quick talk through Minnesota's schedule. We start out the Thursday of Labor Day weekend against Buffalo, then Northwestern State, at Cal, Rutgers, at Ohio State, Purdue, Nebraska, at Iowa, Michigan State, at Oregon, Wisconsin. So we start out, I think Buffalo is not the team I necessarily wanted to start out against because that's a very strong MAC program right now. They won 9 games last year. That said, I wish I could flip that in the Northwestern State game. But that said, if you look at the non-conference schedule as a whole, Northwestern State isn't any good. Cal is a dumpster fire. I mean, they got rated for talent in the winter and spring portal. I don't even know if they're clear on who's on the team at this point. So it seems like the Gophers have kind of a nice runway. Like, I'm not saying the Cal game won't be tough. I'm sure it will be. Early season games are always a little tricky. But if you were going to, go on the road to play a power conference opponent, I feel like Cal is a good draw for a team like Minnesota with a young freshman quarterback there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve early in the year.
Yeah, and that's the hard part is, the roster movement creates many unknown variables. Like how does the team adjust? Do they fit together well fast? Cal had a lot of late portal losses in the spring, which you look at teams that lose players in the spring, it's definitely more of a challenge and their outcomes are kind of varied. Sometimes it goes okay. Other times, it takes a while to get it going. They got a ton of transfers along the O-line. Their running back room is got rated.
They lost They lost 5 running backs, I think, 4 or 5.
Yep. And the bad thing is there's not a lot of supply of running backs in the spring portal window. I wasn't overly enamored with the group. They were able to, muddle it all together. They got Devin Brown at quarterback. How does that come together? Is he able to be the guy? They put a lot of resource. They got a lot of resource in the pass rush. I think that's going to help them a lot. I think that game along, you mentioned Buffalo. Yeah, they're able to run the ball.
Yeah.
All-J Henderson coming back. They got Taquan Roberson. You remember him a long time ago at Penn State. Mobile guy. They're going to lean on the run game. They're going to try to shorten and compress the football game and get you in a spot where maybe it's low scoring. You're working out kinks on both sides. Like the first games in college football these days never look super clean. Like you're going to have to grind these out, and then fans get super annoyed and they're like, oh my God, it's not clicking. But like it just takes time. So I'd say those 2 non-conference games, calendar went some change, but you're going out on the road. You're playing on the West Coast. They added some portal guys that I feel are productive and can help them out. Like Minnesota fans shouldn't discount those 2 games because they're both teams that are going to be competitive.
Yeah, no, Buffalo's a good MAC program, and good MAC programs can be tricky for sure. We've seen that in the past. We didn't lose to them, but we had our struggles with Miami of Ohio. And if it were up to me, I would have the FCS game first. If it were up to me, I would always do that every year and have that first and so the players can, cut their teeth in a game where they don't have a chance to lose. But I agree with you. Yeah, the Cal, that'll be challenging. Although Cal also lost, quarterback Fernando Mendoza to Indiana and all that kind of stuff. So the best thing about this schedule, House, to me, is the bye before Rutgers. Because, PJ Fleck, historically, his teams play really well coming off a bye. It comes early in the season. You have 3 games under your belt. Obviously, the Rutgers game last year was a total debacle. So I imagine, players on the team are probably plenty motivated to get a little revenge. What do you think about Rutgers this year? They don't have Kyle Monungai anymore. They're still going to be, a tough running team. Raymond's a good running back. And then they've got our old buddy Rob Smith coordinating the defense, which I feel like has to be positive for us, right? Has to.
Smitty, man. Rutgers, I thought they did a very good job in the transfer portal. I thought they added some talented players. You can definitely see that their university will let them have a big deficit in their athletic department. They'll let them spend and be able to go get players that they need to get. You look at DT Sheffield, a wide receiver that I like a lot that they can pair up with Duff and Strong, and then CJ Campbell as a back. They got 3 backs that I like. They got Campbell, they got Raymond, they got Brown. And then on defense, they're able to go hard in the pass rush. Eric O'Neill, a transfer from James Madison, is someone I'm pretty high on that I think can be productive for them. You look at how their roster is assembled. They got a lot of productivity that they're able to add through the portal along with the returning guys they have coming back. I think it's going to come down to quarterback. Like, is Ethan able to be that guy that, can be stable? And Ken Kirk-Shiraka, put together a scheme that's going to allow him to be successful and complement his strengths. I thought, he was able to manage it last year. Is there another level in there? Can it be just a touch more that they can get from Ethan? That could be the difference, but their schedule's brutal. Go look at Rutgers' schedule. They have an extremely, extremely tough schedule. I do think they have some talent on the roster, but Minnesota, like you say, has to be ready for this game because there's a lot of familiarity too. You got Kirk, you got Smitty, you got Shiano. Like, the storylines all week, they love the storylines.
Yeah.
Ethan, yeah.
Tough
game. It will be a tough game.
Oh, it'll be tough for sure. I thought last year the mistake they made was they didn't blitz Ethan until the second half. And once they started blitzing him, he didn't play well. But in the first half, when he had all day, he looked good. So
you got to change the picture on him. You got to be exotic, move stuff around. You got to put him in a spot where he's got to sit back there and kind of adjust.
Yeah, and I'm glad we got 2 weeks to prepare to do that, because that should be a Danny Collins special then. That'll be a big test for the young DC, no question about it. So after that, you go to Ohio State. That's probably not going to go great. Unless Julian's saying, unless they can, that's the hope there, right? Ohio State also has a redshirt Frosh quarterback. Can you, like you said, confuse him, change the picture, do something to a younger player like that? But barring a few turnovers, it's always tough to beat Ohio State, especially, on the road. The Gophers haven't since 2001. So it's been a minute. We gave them a good run in that Mo Ibrahim game, but he got hurt late and we lost our starting safety late, which, was not great. Or maybe Minnesota has a chance to win that game. What was that, 2021? But I don't know, House. Here's my only thing with PJ is he doesn't always try to beat Ohio State. Sometimes he does, but sometimes he just says, we're going to run the ball and try to get out of here without injuries. And that drives me crazy. So I don't know. Is there any reason for optimism going into the shoe?
Ohio State wide receiver room, the young guys they got coming in, that's going to be a craze across the country. They're going to have some big time, they just reload, and then their secondary is stacked. I was preparing for their spring game, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. Like the amount of talent they have in their secondary. I think the pass rush is where, they're trying to figure that out. There could be some moving pieces, but then you just go get Bo Atkinson from North Carolina and add another extremely productive player, and you move on. So Ohio State, I don't worry about them, man. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, no, I'm not. So I think now, House, it's not a guarantee, right? But I think there's a chance, a decent chance, that Minnesota is 5-1 at that point. Just because Cal has so much rebuilding and because we get the 2 weeks to get ready for Rutgers. So are we talking potentially, and Nebraska has a pretty easy early season schedule. Could this be a matchup of two ranked teams? And what do you think about Nebraska this year? I mean, we've got Dylan Raiola comes back for year 2. I feel like their passing game will be better this year, but I'm a little skeptical of their running backs, but maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know. What do you think about Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, I think they ideally would have liked to have added a running back, especially through the spring portal window. They had the North Dakota State back that they were trying to get, and then he ended up going to Miami. I just don't know, like, skill position wise, if they're where I want them to be yet. I think they'll be okay on the offensive line. I thought they lost some juice in the pass rush. Are they going to have enough pass rush overall? I think they'll be okay in the secondary, but I think this season for Nebraska is going to come down to the skill spots, the growth of Raiola, and then, being able to get after the quarterback consistently. So I truly feel like that's going to be a really good matchup between Minnesota and Nebraska. It should be a competitive game because of the strengths and weaknesses of both teams, where they are. Obviously it changes week to week, especially as you get going in the season, but that should be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, Mike and I have talked about many times about how, Nebraska and their defensive line, especially this year with the loss of Nash Hotmacher, is going to be bigger and more impactful than what I think a lot of people realize. I mean, the guy
and Ty Robinson too.
Ty
Robinson.
Yes. So I think it's that those losses, not to say that they can't be replaced or there may not be somebody, waiting in the wings, but those guys were game wreckers, especially Nash Hotmacher. Like he
was terrifying, man.
He was terrifying. So I think like it's going to be an adjustment for them. And just I guess we'll have to see whether or not Nebraska can put that together. And obviously our offensive line as well as a factor coming into this game. So yeah, it'll be a true test for both teams.
Absolutely. You brought up the Sam Renner game against Nebraska in 2019. House, I felt so confident about the team by the time we got to that game that I literally turned to the Nebraska fans sitting behind me in my section and I said, it's going to be a long night. And they said, what? And I said, it's going to be a long night. And then it was, and I just felt it. So I don't think that's going to happen this year, for what it's worth. I think it's going to be a very good game between Nebraska and Minnesota. But I hope we can keep it going because, I mean, we've gotten them, 5-6 times in a row. So it'd be nice to extend that streak.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, tricky game at Iowa always. I'm fascinated with Iowa because they did upgrade at quarterback. They brought in the South Dakota State transfer, Gronowski, and he looks like a really good player. But I just don't know who he's throwing to. And also, I think Iowa's good at running back, but they're definitely not Caleb Johnson good at running back anymore. So this is going to be a tough game, but we did win the last time we went to Kinnick. I feel like I weirdly feel like Minnesota has a good chance here. It might just be because I'm planning to attend the game, but it's always hard to win at Kinnick. But I think this is a good opportunity. This Iowa team is not bulletproof.
Well, I'm also like for us, and we talked about it last year during the season with Iowa and looking at their defense, which obviously has always been elite for the most part. But last year, not to say it was bad by any means, it was still very good. But you started to see some cracks that us as Gopher fans were not used to seeing, and
secondary is leaky.
Yeah, so that was a little odd. So what are your thoughts on taking that into consideration as well?
Yeah, I think another year of development, some of those guys getting some time and action in terms of, transition and personnel there, the talent that they had the previous year now kind of developing some of those guys up, especially in the secondary. I think they'll tighten some things up, just an uncharacteristic, giving up some big plays and getting eyes caught in the wrong spot. Gronowski, I think, is going to be super intriguing, talented player.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the moves that they made in the offseason, bringing in an offensive mind from Wake Forest, are they going to incorporate some of that long mesh RPO stuff into their offense? Like, what are some of the things that they're going to do to pair up with Tim Lester? I think Tim Lester, obviously brought in a lot of the Shanahan principles. I think that's a sell to quarterbacks coming in that, hey, we're going to run this type of offense. But I mean, I'm wondering if they're going to throw some packages in there with some of the stuff that he did at Wake Forest as well. So I think Iowa, they always find a way to develop talent, figure it out, hit stride. It's, you're playing down a Kinnick. It's always going to be a tough environment, tough game. I think this quarterback, when you look at quarterback, this guy is the most talented guy they've had in quite some time. Probably going back to Nate Stanley.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
yeah.
Nate Stanley, who tore us up.
Yeah, we're just the main thing we're thinking on offense is isn't the improvement at quarterback, is we still just don't know who their wideouts are going to be. Like who's going to be. I mean, we know they have Vanderzee. We know it's not that isn't some level of talent, but it just seems to be we haven't seen any standouts in a long time. And
I mean, it's been a long time since Marvin McNutt, man. It's been a while.
Well, they're going to lean on the tight end. They got a Stringer. They got, they took transfer Sam Phillips out of Chattanooga as well, productive player down there. So I think if Iowa can get an elevation in their skill talent, the quarterback is definitely going to raise stuff up. They got some stability in the play calling side of it. I don't worry about their defense because they figure it out over there. Phil Parker's one of the best in the biz. So
yeah.
All right, on. All right. Well, after that, we've got Sparty at home. We whipped Sparty the last time we played them. I quite enjoyed that. That was a big Mo Ibrahim game. They should be improved this year. Aiden Childs is in year 2. Jonathan Smith is in year 2. The interesting thing for me is their defense any more effective? Because at one point last year, they went 6 games without a sack. And considering the Joe Rossi thing, I did kind of enjoy that. So, but that said, I know Rossi's a great coach. I'm sure they'll be better this year. What do you think about the challenge that Sparty presents?
Spartans should be better. I like what they did in the wide receiver room in the transfer portal, bringing in a lot of different mix of skill sets. And, Nick Marsh can be an alpha. I think he's a future top-level, first-round talent type of wideout.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
And then you bring in complementary weapons like they did McCray and Kelly, Evan Boyd. They went down, got Rodney Bullard at the lower level, who is a very explosive guy. Tao Tolliver as a back. They need him to be very productive because obviously they lost Nate Carter and then they lost Cameron Lynch-Adams as well. So are they going to have enough in the running back room? But they went hard in O-line in the transfer portal. They got, good mix of tight ends. Jack Belling is going to be one of the better tight ends in the conference. Yeah. So they're going to be very good in the skill spots, but like Aiden Childs, does he improve? I think that's kind of the key for them this year. I think if he takes a big step forward and the flashes become consistent, this is a team that can improve significantly. Defensively, you mentioned it, like pass rush, is it going to be good enough? I felt like defensive tackle was kind of an investment year. They got a lot of guys that could potentially emerge. Like you look at Ruquan Buckley, who's just a specimen physically and athletically. I'm watching him as a potential emerging guy. They added a couple transfers that needed some time to develop along the pass rush. I wondered about the secondary. They were able to add a couple of productive transfers there and also continue to add transfers in the secondary in the second portal window. I think that's going to be the key. How does that all come together? I think Michigan State will be much improved, though. I like Jonathan Smith a lot. I think he's a good coach. He's underrated.
Yeah, he's a good coach. John has staked his claim that Aiden Childs is going to be the man this year. So we're going to see if he's right. I'm hoping he's wrong, but he has staked his claim that Aiden Childs.
If he's good, watch out. If he's good, watch out.
I just have. I mean, I'm not saying maybe it might not. It might be like by the end of the year we'll realize that this guy is going to be insanely dangerous because I just see so much raw talent there that is crazy.
He is a cannon.
Yeah, and his like escapability and his improvisation, which may or may not have been on purpose, obviously.
Right.
But some stuff he did last year was just crazy. But then also he would then follow it up by a pick or something like that. But
a lot of quarterbacks make a big jump, so it's possible he makes a big jump. So that's not a game that's a game that we can't take for granted. And then of course we get the bye week before going to Autzen. I kind of wish this bye was before any other game. And, Oregon did just lose their best receiver for the year, which is too bad. But, Oregon, Ohio State at this point, playing them on the road seems like a tall order.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about loading up in the transfer portal on offense, high-level offensive linemen. Did an awesome job there. Do you think that skill positions, specifically at wideout, I was still kind of wondering how that was all going to shake out. But being able to add Mekhi Hughes, who I think is going to be one of the better backs in the country this year, transfer, they'll figure it out. And Dan Lanning defensively does. I mean, he's one of my favorite coaches in the whole country. Maximizing personnel, recruiting to his scheme, understanding what fits his personnel. They're just going to reload. I do think they could take a small step back slightly just based on where they're at in terms of transition on the roster. But Oregon, they're going to have the premier talent, the speed, and the versatility that you're looking for all across the board. That injury is going to be big, though, at wide receiver.
Yes, that is different. But by the time we get to them, they'll have figured it out, It's one of those things where you wish you played them earlier in the year kind of thing, probably. But such is life. And then we play Northwestern at Wrigley Field, which we could do a whole episode on how much we hate football at baseball fields. Like, we despise it.
Yes.
It seems like the turf is never consistent and guys are falling and it's just dangerous. And I don't like it. But Northwestern's kind of, hard times. Preston Stone maybe is an improvement, but he wasn't, he did get played out. He played himself out of a job last year at SMU. So can he get back to his 2023 form? And Northwestern, they should be a little better. They got Martez Lewis from us. They should be a little better up front. I don't know. I wonder where their psyche is going to be at this point. I wonder if David Braun is still going to have a job at the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to see. Do we see a motivated, plucky Northwestern team, or do we see a team that's kind of thrown in the towel? I think either is on the table.
And that's what I always say about making game predictions, especially as the season goes on, before the season starts, because teams get beat up, they lose players, depth is challenged. You're playing in a neutral site. It creates a lot of interesting dynamics that have to be looked at the week of the game. I do think Northwestern's going to be better along the offensive line.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to try to lean on running the football and controlling the line of scrimmage and shortening the games. And Preston Stone the previous year, super efficient in a lot of metrics, as showing the flashes. Are they able to kind of adapt the scheme around what he does well? I think in the play action game and some of the stuff that they do conceptually, I feel like Northwestern pass rush wise, they've got some, guys that I think could potentially emerge to be able to be effective and rotational up front. But I wonder about the secondary. That's the thing I'm watching with Northwestern, is whether they have enough in the secondary. They lost some talent there to the portal, and that's something to watch.
Yeah, they lost some playmakers at wide receiver too, just a graduation.
Correct.
So I wonder who they're throwing the ball to also. All right, well, that brings us to our last game of the year, as always, the Axe game at home versus Wisconsin. We know it's going to be the Saturday, not Black Friday this year, which should be good for the crowd. This could be a lot of things, House. This could be a thing where Wisconsin's 5-6 and needs to win to get to a bowl game. This could be a thing where Wisconsin's 4-7 and Fickle's already been fired. This could be a thing where they're 7-4 and the whole, oh my God, Wisconsin came back and they've got it together. And Jeff Grimes is the answer at O coordinator. And the defense finally in year 3 under Mike Tressel comes together. And I don't know, man. I don't know. We just did our Wisconsin preview episode with Big Ten Ted. And I'm a little more worried about them right now, but I also just am so unsure of what to expect from Wisconsin this year.
I feel like their defense, they added some good players on that side of the ball, that their defense should be solid. I worry more about what their offense is going to look like. Do they have enough firepower at wide receiver? They really need 1 or 2 guys to emerge there. And then at running back as well. I mean, I think Dupree is very talented and could be an emerging talent, but losing Tawi Walker, having those two as a 1-2 punch would have probably been pretty nice. I thought maybe they would take a wide out and a running back in the portal, for sure, running back. And then, they had to take they had to take offensive line help and get a tackle in here from Central Michigan in the spring window because of, where they were at that position and injury and all that. So I wonder about their offense
for the year. Yeah.
Yes. So I look at it offense is going to be the key. I think they did a good job bringing in productive quarterbacks that have played before. They have two, guys that have gotten reps in Edwards and O'Neal from San Diego State. But I don't know, man. Skill positions are going to be the key for them. Do they have enough firepower in this age to keep up? And does their defense do it? Is their defense talented enough to overcome some of the shortcomings that they're going to face potentially early on offense that, might take some time by the end of the year? Like you say, they could have figured it out by then.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm really curious to see what Billy Edwards looks like this year too, because he threw a lot of YOLO balls up for grabs, as we saw when we played Maryland last year. But that was also with a bad offensive line. So I don't know. Wisconsin should be a little better up front than Maryland was. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. All right, House, you've been more than generous with your time. We can get you out of here. But the last thing I got to ask you is, do you have a prediction for what Minnesota does in the regular season this year?
I don't have one yet because I haven't done it enough practice. I always tell people August 15th is kind of where I get my vibe on the team, where they're at. Because I've gotten through a few practices. I think there's a lot of unknown, though. I think there's a wide range of outcomes in terms of the way this season could potentially go, just because I do think some of the teams that they play are, Cal. How are they going to come together? First game against Buffalo. I do think Rutgers and Michigan State are going to be a lot better than people think. So those games will be tougher, but they're both at home, and you got an extra week to get ready for Rutgers. I think the Nebraska game is pivotal. They're going to need to win that game to potentially put themselves in a spot to, elevate up, whether that's to get in bowl contention or to be in a spot where they're improving their bowl status. So unknown, I think there's a wide range of outcomes. I want to get my eyes on the team a little bit more and see where everybody's rosters are at coming out of the fall before I make a definitive prediction. But maybe you'll have me on again like after August 15th that we can.
House, you are always welcome. You have a standing invitation. You are always welcome.
I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's willing to make a prediction. I am just one of those guys that wants to be informed before I make a.
I'm just going to mark you down for 10-2 college football playoff bound. That's what I'm going to do. So it's
yeah, now the article comes out. House predicts 10-2 college football playoff. I don't know.
I'm gonna go to Twitter and post it and say you said it.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Everybody, please, no.
We wouldn't do that to you. We never would.
No.
All right. Well,
I am the most straight. I'm just like a week to week guy. I don't know. I'm a little bit different in that sense. Like I want to evaluate matchups week to week.
Sure.
Absolutely. And things do change all the time. So that is a good call. All right, House, say one more time where everyone can find you on Twitter and also support your work.
You can find me on Twitter at DanielHouseMN and go over and subscribe to the site, GophersGuru.com. $5 a month gets you access to the subscription package. It's great to be able to provide, a little bit different coverage than the typical reporter. I can kind of take some analysis pieces and do some things that other people don't do. So check it out. You can try it for a month and see what you think. And let me know if you have any questions about it.
Yeah, I will vouch for it. It's fantastic. I'm super excited to go back and even read some articles from the past when I wasn't subscribed. So I will have that, and those links to go to House's website will be in the description. So you can go right to House on Twitter or on the website from this episode. All right. Well, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate you. You gave us a lot of insight today. And, hope you have an awesome summer. And then if you want to check back in August, we'd be more than happy to have you on.
Please do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sounds good to me. We'll do our prediction then.
Perfect.
Yes, love it.
10-2. 10-2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Oh man, that was fun.
Yeah. That was fantastic. That was great. Again, as we expected, incredibly insightful, very intelligent breakdowns. And it was just really cool to hear about that as a Gopher fan, but also as a college football fan to hear his thoughts on what's going on with the Big Ten and when we're, doing the schedule game as well. So it's really cool.
You know what I'm always struck by with guys who are really knowledgeable like House about the rest of the Big Ten? Man, how good is the Big Ten now?
Yes.
It's so tough. And in the NIL era, it's become even tougher because everyone can plug holes. It used to be you knew a team if they were bad in the secondary one year, you knew it was probably going to at least be till midseason the next year until they figured it out, till other guys get more experience and whatever. But now you can just go to the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And Big Ten teams can pay more, like we've talked about in the past, than most other teams can. So it's going to be quite a year. I do think there are a lot of teams with a lot of question marks on Minnesota's schedule.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Cal, we don't know what we're going to see from them. Purdue. Oh, we skipped Purdue. Whoops. Sorry, Purdue. We skipped you. I do think you'll be improved under Barry Odom for what it's worth. But I didn't mean to not have House comment on Purdue. That wasn't intentional. So Boilermakers fans, we apologize.
Yeah. Well, when we have him come back on in August, we'll
find out what he predicts for that game for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. But Purdue's got a lot of different stuff. Nebraska's got a lot of new stuff. Iowa's got a lot of new stuff. Sparty's got a lot of new stuff. Northwestern and Wisconsin have a lot of new stuff. I mean, this is, I think, one of the hardest years to predict what's going to happen in the Big Ten I can remember in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many new quarterbacks, so much turnover. I'm not. Yeah, I think there's just a ridiculous amount of uncertainty, including the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Yes,
it's and so it's unless you're Ohio State or
Oregon,
where you just reload,
or Penn State, who's about to have a potentially transformational year.
Yep, I think it's hard to say. Illinois, I think is obviously because they just have so much coming.
Illinois is going to be really tough too.
Yeah,
but yeah, man, after that, it's going to be crazy. Crazy in the Big Ten.
I also kind of I respect his ability to be like, you know what, I'm not making a prediction until we get closer. I wish we could get like the AP poll and whatever to buy in on that. Like, let's wait 3-4 weeks until we actually make predictions. But
oh man,
that's a whole other conversation.
That would be great if we could do that. But that brings us back to the whole AP poll problem.
Yeah.
In that it is terrible.
It's awful.
It really is. But yeah, I'm the kicking game scares me a little bit. For us, for our Gophers, the kicking game scares me a little bit just because we don't know what to expect. And you have to be competent in the kicking game or it's going to lose you games. We lost 3 games last year on kicking.
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, that was rough. So I hope that, whether it's Denneberg or Jackson, one of those guys is ready to step up. And at punter, hopefully we have someone who can punt it a little further than Mark Crawford.
That'd be great. That'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. Now Crawford was a great short field punter, right?
Yeah.
He was great at pinning guys. So that was a really good skill for him. So, but we just don't know.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that we got Darius Taylor.
Yeah.
And we got Coy Parrish.
Kerry Brown. Devin Eastern.
Yeah. We got some guys.
Yeah, we got some dudes for sure. Yeah.
And I'm really excited. I'm excited about it, man. I think it's gonna be a really fun year in Dinkytown, where my t-shirt is representing.
I agree.
Yeah. Anything, John, any other big thoughts you have from House or about the Gophers before we get out of here?
No, I just think it's an exciting year. I think that Drake Lindsay has a high ceiling. I agree. I think both of us have kind of talked about that. There will be games where he's going to have, he's going to look like a freshman, but I think that you're going to see in each game, I predict anyways, that you're going to see what the potential could be. And he's only going to get better throughout the season, as long as he can stay healthy. But the health of a team is going to be a factor with everybody this year.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a lot of, reason to be optimistic as a Gopher fan for sure. So
awesome. All right. Well, thanks for listening to our preview of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. If you have missed it, we already have previews of Illinois and Wisconsin. So feel free to check those out. We have awesome experts for those previews as well. I have them. I have a playlist in our YouTube page where I'm adding all the previews as we go. So if you want to check out any of the teams, we're going to preview all 18. We're still looking for experts for a few of the teams. So if you have any ideas, please hit us up. But otherwise, John, you want to say what you always say before we get out of here.
Yes, as always, you can find We Live for Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher, and you can email us We Live for Saturday B1G@gmail.com. Please follow, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. Do please subscribe especially on YouTube. So if you're an audio listener, as always, go to YouTube. And thank you. It's another long podcast. We had a lot of fun. That's kind of how we like to do it here. So if you're still rocking with us, we appreciate you. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you in the next one.